Years ago, there was an effort made by some to reintroduce something to commercial radio called the Fairness Doctrine. For those of you who are younger and may not know what that term means, it basically refers back to something that was put in place in the Harry Truman era in the 1940s and 50s. Basically, what the Fairness Doctrine does is that it says that commercial radio stations, particularly those of a news and talk radio variety, would be required to put balanced presentations from both sides on their airwaves. Now, on its face, all that sounds fairly innocent. The reality was, as the legendary Rush Limbaugh pointed out, people like him would never be allowed to get on radio stations because the owners and the general managers would deem them too hot and too controversial. Hence, he came up with the interesting nickname, the Hush Rush Bill. Now, what does that have to do with present day? Well, the Uniparty, in an effort to never let a crisis go to waste, have come up with something that, if it becomes law, is going to make the Hush Rush Bill look very tame by comparison. Hang on, we're going to talk about it. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. In recent days, as many of you have probably heard already, there have been efforts afoot to get a ban of TikTok put in place. Now, TikTok, as you know, is the social media platform that's swept the nation for the past few years. It allows individuals to upload very short videos, and a lot of people have been using it for a lot of different reasons. In some cases, just having fun, posting crazy little videos. In some cases, actual political discourse in a matter of short bursts, short videos. Well, a lot has been made about this platform, primarily because it's owned by a company that has ties to the Chinese Communist government. Well, as I said, the Uniparty is never going to let a crisis go to waste. So now legislation's floating around that would out and out give the government the ability to ban TikTok. This is called the Restrict Act. I want to do a quick video on it tonight, and I've been looking for an article that would allow me to sum up my concerns, and I finally found one. But I have to be fair, as always. I give a hat tip to the attorney Robert Barnes, himself a social media content creator. He pointed me to this article, so having read it now, I do want to go over a little bit of it. It comes from Reason Magazine, and this is probably one of the best pieces that I've found that sums up the concerns of many on this whole issue. So let's take a quick look. From Reason Magazine, this was published on Friday, March 31st, by the author J.D. Tussell. Headline, The Restrict Act would restrict a lot more than TikTok. Once again, politicians use popular fears to push for open-ended power. Oh, and believe me, when you get a load of what's in this bill, you're going to be calling your congressman and senator. And if you don't think you are, trust me, when this is all over with, you're going to want to. So we read a little further. First paragraph. If you believe the government should be in the business of banning things such as popular communication tools, the details of the efforts to eject TikTok from the United States should give you pause. Predictably, politicians are using fears that the popular social media service is spying on behalf of the Chinese government to propose broad legislation that threatens to affect much more than one app. Now, I want to pause real quick and say a couple things. I think the author sums this up beautifully because, as always, governments love to use fear as a means to try and push something through that on its face sounds well intentioned, but the reality is it does a whole lot more than what the name of the legislation leads you to believe. And that also gets to another question. Should the federal government have the power to shut down or ban a social media platform? Now, personally, I'm of the opinion absolutely not. I don't want information restricted in any way, shape, or form unless pornography, defamation, slander. These things I understand, these things the American people have already accepted into law previous to this current situation. But with the ties to the Chinese Communist government, you begin to understand the natural concern of people. They're worried that the Chinese Communist government will begin to use this app to start data mining on American citizens, maybe even American government officials. Who knows? But we'll get back into that a little bit more later. So here's some of the more information from that article. And the author asks a very interesting question. Would the Restrict Act, aka the TikTok ban bill, criminalize the use of VPNs? And a VPN, you may ask? Virtual Private Network, a privacy tool that encrypts your data and routes it through a secure server, giving you a new IP address and making it appear as though you're at that location. Am I reading this definition because, I think it's really pertinent to the video? No, it's because I'm an old fart and I'm trying to understand the terminology myself. But would the Restrict Act criminalize the use of VPNs? The answer in many cases is yes, but wait, there's more. The Restrict Act, proposed by Senator Mark Warner and a list of co-sponsors, including Senator John Thune, Republican, South Dakota, the Uniparty, does not mention the word TikTok or the parent company ByteDance or even social media. Instead, it hands a whole lot of power to the government, particularly the Secretary of Commerce, to, quote, review and prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and, quote, foreign adversaries regarding information and communication technology. The bill's text states in part, the Secretary, in consultation with relevant executive department and agency heads, is authorized to and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, prohibit, investigate, or otherwise mitigate, including by negotiating, entering into, or imposing and enforcing any mitigation measure, keep in mind these terms, to address any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States that the Secretary determines, poses an undue or unacceptable risk of. Ladies and gentlemen, I said a moment ago in the intro to this video that this is worse than the Hush Rush Act that was proposed years ago to put the fairness doctrine back in place on commercial radio stations. This has got to be one of the most broad grants of power to secretaries of the executive branch that I've ever heard of. Mind you, as the author points out, this bill doesn't use the word TikTok, doesn't use the word social media, doesn't even mention the parent company, but it grants the Secretary of Commerce the ability to do a whole hell of a lot in the name of making sure you and I are safe from the Chinese Communist government. A little bit more information in this article, and I'll point it out, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on the whole thing. Here we go. The author goes on, it then launches into a list of presumed horribles involving information and communication technology products, critical infrastructure, digital economy, crypto, a federal election, or national security. It includes a vague authorization of action to counter, quote, coercive or criminal activities by a foreign adversary that are designed to undermine democratic processes and institutions or steer policy and regulatory decisions in favor of the strategic objectives of a foreign adversary. Oh, man, this thing is bad. Yeah, I mentioned a moment ago, you heard me slide the term crypto in there. Let me show you something that I just found a moment ago. Let me pop back to this real quick. There are those who are already worried about cryptocurrencies. Quote, although the primary targets of this legislation are companies like TikTok, the language of the bill could potentially be used to block or disrupt cryptocurrency transactions and, in extreme cases, block Americans' access to open source tools or protocols like Bitcoin, warns Coin Center. Under the bill, any technology targeted by the government should be connected to a, quote, foreign adversary. Those are defined in the text as China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela. But, and here it comes, the bill also allows the Secretary of Commerce to designate new foreign adversaries in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence. That allows an enormous amount of room to go after technology developed in whole or in part in countries that don't play along with the crackdown on cryptocurrencies, encryption, or online speech. And the language may allow even broader reach for meddling by U.S. officials. And ladies and gentlemen, there are many worries when it comes to the Restrict Act, but here's the biggest one that I've got personally. If this gives the power to the federal government to shut down a social media site like TikTok, what stops the federal government from going after YouTube, Rumble, Odysee, BitChute, any of them, ladies and gentlemen, anyone that the federal government deems to be coercive or engaging in foreign activity? The language of this bill is so broad, we are opening the door to all kinds of things that nobody ever dreamed of. And that's what happens. A problem comes up, the uniparty or the deep state whips people into a hysteria about it, and then, oh my God, we've got to do something, we've got to do something. Congress must act, Congress must act. And we pass a bill that not only doesn't address the problem that we're all worried about, it gives a broad grant of power to the federal government to do things that nobody would ever envision them doing, or for that matter, no one ever wants them doing. Folks, I normally don't tell people in my audience what to do, but this is one of those moments where you need to call your congressman and call your senators and tell them you want them to vote this down. If the federal government is so worried about China data mining, then there's two things that they could do without ever putting this boondoggle into place. Number one, restrict all federal employees and all federal contractors from using TikTok. They can't have it on their computers. They can't have it on their cell phones. They can't have it on anything that would allow the Chinese Communist government to data mine off of them. That, to me, makes sense. The people most vulnerable to this sort of thing, or maybe better to say who would be the most targeted, would be the government first. Now, the second thing you could do, and this is something that I think is long overdue, and even doing what I'm about to propose is fraught with risk, we need some type of legislation that would start protecting the privacy of consumers' information. Now, is it the ultimate cure? Probably not. But it'd go a long way toward resolving this issue without putting something like this, a broad granted sweep of power, in the hands of the federal government. Beware this one, ladies and gentlemen. Start looking at the issue, because this is going to come back more and more in the days ahead. My name is Brian Trippett. I'm your Front Porch Conservative, and I'll see you next time.